to join us tonight for the last of the Eye on Detroit panel discussions for this year. Tonight's topic is something we've been really looking forward to. It's all about what's the brand, essentially. So when you think of brand, what do you think of? I mean, I think of drinking a Coca-Cola and going to Disney. These things that you hear words, companies, organizations that all of a sudden bring you somewhere else because there's something associated with that brand. And so that's something we're going to dig into a little bit deeper, whether we're talking professional, big-time company, corporate, nonprofit, or even just your own personal branding, like your stationery, even your LinkedIn. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. So we'll get started tonight. I'm going to hand off the microphone to Steve Busch. He is Michigan's first ever brand manager. So everyone give him a round of applause and have a great time.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. And can you hear me if I talk without? Yeah. I think I'll do that, just because I think I use my hands too much. But thank you for coming out to attend this panel, and thank you to the Detroit Center for putting on these Eye on Detroit events. It's a great way for the university to engage with the city of Detroit and the greater surrounding areas, offering these opportunities for people to come up and talk and share their best practices and experiences. So we'll keep this pretty casual. There's a total of 5 of us tonight. We had unfortunately someone that couldn't attend at the last minute, but I think you're going to get a wealth of information from the group that is here. And as Anna mentioned, my name is Steve Busch, and I most recently was the brand manager for the University of Michigan, and I was with the university for just shy of 12 years. And I spent time at the university promoting and generating awareness around the Ross School of Business brand. And then about 6 years ago, I stepped over to the central part of the university to try and introduce some greater brand consistency and continuity with the greater university. And I recently left the university to try my hand at consulting at the end of 2018. So far it is exciting and fun, and allows me to pick my daughter up from school and do some other things that I wanted to pursue. So I thought I would just very quickly introduce we just have each person here introduce themselves, and then I'll just give you a little framing around brand to kind of get the conversation going, and then each person here will step in and provide their own perspective. But anyway.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Merritt. I had the pleasure of going to the University of Michigan as well, Go Blue. And currently serve as a pastor, associate pastor at the Straight A International Church. Also have the blessed opportunity to run 2 organizations, both centered on impacting young people in the city. It's both a for-profit and a non-profit model. On the for-profit side, we use fashion as a way to drive social impact, and we donate 20% of our company purchases to fund our nonprofit arm. And our nonprofit arm consists of a 4-year after-school high school program where we stick with a group of 9th graders through their high school graduation and provide them a $5,000 college scholarship if they complete the program and get to school. Currently supporting about 100 young people in the city. And then also recently opened up a coffee shop on 7 Mile in Vernon, the Narrowway Cafe.
Can I skip the microphone as well?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I talk with my hands as well, so I'd rather be animated and all over the place. I'd also like to thank you for coming out and joining us tonight. I'm really excited to learn from my fellow panelists. I'm Carrie, Madison. I'm an entrepreneur. I have sold and I've started and developed 2 healthcare companies and have had the wonderful opportunity to sell those. I also am an instructor at Eastern Michigan University, where I work with young students and professionals to really work on who they are, develop their personal brand, discover who they want to be as a professional and who they are as a person, and how they put those things together. In addition to that, I continue to keep my foot in the professional world by doing some consulting in the healthcare industry. I think that the more I do in the professional world, the more relevant I can be in the classroom for my students. So I I stay active. I currently work with a company called the HCS Group. They're a wonderful company. They have been chosen as Detroit Free Press Great Workplaces for the last 2 years. And I've learned a lot from being a part of their wonderful culture and continuing to grow there. So that's why I am.
We'll just move on. My name is Matt Thieleman, and in order for me to talk about what I do, it's really important for me to first talk about what I believe. And I believe that each of us was put here in this life for a particular purpose. And I view my role as helping people to figure that purpose out and then create an impact from that. Today, that looks like me being a coach to high-impact entrepreneurs and leaders, working with organizations to create cultures of what I call mindful leadership. That is engaged employees who know why they're there and actually care about it. I started as a marketer, and that's actually where I met Steve, and realized at some point that the work that I was doing was not making the impact that I wanted it to. And so I went on this sort of process of self-discovery, and in 2015 founded a company called Golden Bristle that turned into what I do today. I have no idea what I'm going to do 5 or 10 years from now, but I sit here today as coach and solopreneur for the time being.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Am I good? Okay. My name is Carrie, and I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years now. My company is Ministry Marketing Solutions, the name meaning that I love ministry. I love to market. I work with churches like Straight Gate and Word of Faith and Greater Grace, and really primarily 20 years ago, before the internet, I was helping them brand themselves so that they can actually bring in more, not customers, but more congregants, I guess you could say. And from that, pastors really had to learn how to do themselves. So I've worked with pastors like maybe heard of T.D. Jakes. So obviously he's a brand where you say his name, it's like, so they brand themselves with books. So primarily I work with authors and speakers, primarily those that have good messages, not necessarily have to be pastors, but people who want to spread positive messages. The company started Ministry Marketing Solutions, it's still Ministry Marketing Solutions, but I brand myself now with the advent of the internet. Personal branding is so important, so ministry marketing is not necessarily the name that people recognize as much as my name, which is Pam Carrie. So I translated that into PamCarriePR.com, and so really I help authors and speakers brand themselves, basically what I've done over the last 20 years. Before that, my career, 10 years before that, I worked for the Free Press. I worked for the Salvation Army for many years. And that's probably where the idea or the inkling of really doing ministry marketing solutions, because I don't know if anyone knows about the Red Shield of the Salvation Army. It is church, keyword being salvation. So that's where when I had my daughter, our daughter, sorry. When I had our daughter, I decided I wanted to work from home. And that's when I started Ministry Marketing Solutions. It was almost like a micro salvation.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So you can see there's some really impressive experiences here on stage that all of you are encouraged to tap into, both tonight with questions, but also outside of here. We'll be available a little bit afterwards to talk, and then certainly people have provided some content information. So take advantage of that. If you have questions, I'm happy to, as I think others here, to help anybody that has questions. And did everybody recognize that the food in next door, that there was a theme to that food? Yeah, Detroit themed foods, right? Our Detroit brands, Fago, soft drinks, and Tony Dog, and Saunders Fudge. And I had to eat that Saunders cream puff to time my sugar crash so that it didn't happen on stage. And we'll see how I do here. I don't think I've had one of those in probably 12 years, but it was awesome. To just kind of kick it off, when you think about brands, there's a quote that I love. It's my favorite quote around branding, and it's by the legendary marketer John Hegarty from Britain. And I'll see if I can not butcher it. And he says, a brand is the most valuable real estate in the world. It is a corner of someone's mind. And I love that because when I say the word the words Coca-Cola, or Nike, or Apple, I bet in everybody in this room, there's a mental picture in your mind of those brands, and you recognize the Nike swoosh in your mind, or you may see a product that you certainly that you engage with. Coca-Cola, the script and the red and the shape of the bottle, the wonderful simple Apple logo with the bite out of it, as well as all the products that Apple provides that have driven so much of technology device design. So in each one of those, they started, they're big now, they're huge, right? We all recognize those. And, but they started initially as an idea. And they started with a brand promise, and that promise we'll call the brand promise. Whether they are a 100-year-old company or relatively new, they started with that promise. And so for Coca-Cola, it was sweetened, carbonated beverages that brought a smile to your face. For Nike, it was performance running shoes for the amateur to the professional athlete. And for Apple, certainly it was bringing computer technology and innovation to the individual user. And they started there, but they've grown to be so much more than that. And so part of it's like, well, how do you get there? How do you go from an idea or an individual idea or a promise, and it's never the logo doesn't get you there. But before we go any deeper into that, we'll take a little side journey with me here. If I could see a show of hands, who here has someone that they would identify as their best friend? Right. Now let me ask you this question. Who here amongst you would also label your best friend as suffering from schizophrenia? Anybody? My wife didn't raise her hand, so that's a good one. Yeah, so there's a reason why that is. There are fundamental components that are required to have a relationship with somebody or an entity. And typically, if I were to say, in this room, if I were to ask each one of you to describe your best friend, you would probably use words that were like, I can count on them. They're reliable, they're predictable, they provide value to me, they enhance my life, they make it funner, they help me out when I need something, I trust them. And those components are necessary for relationships. And if you can think about, a brand, it's the same situation. Brands, if a brand cannot establish trust with its consumer, it cannot have a relationship with the consumer, a consistent relationship, a reliable relationship. And so if we think about that, we think about brands that you do engage with, or brands that you represent, or your own brand, what's necessary is that we think about those components that make up trust, and trust leads to relationships. And so, going back to those brands, we think about Nike, Apple, and Coca-Cola, and others, they're consistent. There's consistency there. There's reliability. You know what you're getting. When you buy a Coke or another Coca-Cola beverage, there's certain things that you know you're going to get. You're going to get a beverage that at a good price that's going to taste good and is safe to drink, right? And so, conversely, if you have a brand and that brand doesn't deliver consistency, that your individuals, if you were to ask this audience here, to describe a brand, each one of you, and you described it differently, that's a problem. Because then we can't be advocates for that brand, because we can't have the same conversations. If a brand that we're talking about means something to me that means different to David and so on, then that brand has an inability to deliver a very concise message and clarity about itself. And so people can't then advocate on its behalf. And we lose the ability to have affinity for a brand. All those things, all of that is what's required of that is to consistency around the brand and its behaviors and how people engage with it and what it stands for, that there's consistency. And even who it partners with, there's consistency from step to step to step. And that's what leads to those relationships. So I thought that might be a good way to kind of think about that, because we all have those relationships with people. And we probably have some where they're maybe more difficult to have a relationship with someone. Or maybe we struggle with having relationships with people. And if we think about those components that we really value, and consistency being one of them, you can see where that sort of, that kind of starts, that starts the ball rolling in terms of generating affinity for an entity. But with that, I thought I would just ask you folks to weigh in as well about your sense of brand. So, any one of you is welcome to.
Want me to go? I'm just curious, who's attending today because they're interested in learning more about professional branding, and who's here to learn more about personal branding? So,
What's the difference?
yeah, right, exactly, because it really starts with personal branding. So I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. When I think about brand, I think about it as it's this tangible thing that you can uniquely make your own, right? So how do you do that? And I think Steve touched on some of those things that are really important in doing that. But when I work with students and young professionals who are really confused, they don't know what industry they want to go into, they don't know what profession they want to pursue, right? They don't even know who they are as a person. They don't know where to begin. So I recommend that they kind of take the time to step back and analyze and evaluate their social capital. Look at the communities in which you exist, okay? Steve talked about the importance of bringing value. So as an individual, I want to look at where can I have an impact? And listening to David make his introduction, I am just blown away by the impact that you're having on your community here in Detroit. It jumps out, his brand speaks to me almost immediately. So I encourage students to get out there and find out, how can I help you? Where can I make an impact and how do I bring value, right? And there are so many ways you can do that. And when you identify those opportunities, start saying yes to them. Make yourself a resource to people and get out there, because this is where you start to establish those unique qualities and traits that make your brand who you are. I can give you several examples, but I don't want to go on and on too much. I can give you several examples of where you might start to bring that value, where you might start to discover your brand. A couple of things, again, to tag off of what Steve said. Be consistent with your message. Be genuine, be authentic, be sincere. Don't mimic other people's brands. Make sure it's your own, okay? Because people will see through that. And start giving. Give graciously, give genuinely. Because that's what people need from us right now. When you identify opportunities to give, people will recognize the importance of the value you bring. So identify those opportunities. If you want to know how you can start doing that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that afterwards. The other thing I think that's important is, if we think about brands like Coca-Cola and Disney, some of those we've referred to tonight, there is no such thing as instant perfection. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Start taking some risks. Make mistakes. Start embracing failure. I know I hate failure, but I know that I grow the greatest when I fail. Okay, so get comfortable with that. There's no such thing. We live in this society now where we see these young entrepreneurs that develop an app and take it to market, and all of a sudden overnight they sell their companies for $5 billion. How often do we see that? Well, guess what? That doesn't happen overnight. There's no such thing as overnight success or overnight perfection, okay? So I guarantee you that that person had a lot of trial and error, had a lot of mistakes, and a lot of failures before they actually launched that app. So think about how you're going to go about doing that, right? And then I guess the final thing that I kind of want to add on here that might feed into your message about mindfulness is, I think it's incredibly important to be able to tell your story. Engage your audience. Get them involved in telling your story. Organizations for years now have relied on testimonies from their clients and their customers, right? Start engaging others. There's so much power in the perception that people have of you. And going back to how I want to lead into Matt here is, establish a really solid practice of gratitude, okay? Get up every single day and recognize, acknowledge, acknowledge and appreciate what you have to be grateful for. Do this during the times that you really hit those very dark patches on your journey. We all know what those are, right? But that's what is going to help you work through that. And so when you ask me, okay, well, great, I did the gratitude thing. Why is that important to branding? I guess I just tell you that a good solid practice of branding just makes you a damn decent person. And if that doesn't speak for itself, I don't know what does.
One of the things that I do when I work with clients when they're trying to establish a brand is to do a photo shoot. And the photo shoot is really more for them to see themselves differently. So not just like a headshot, but like a branding shoot. So say for instance I'm working with a client and I say, well, bring some props with you for your brand shoot. Or where would you like to do the shoot? So I got Mel is sitting here right here. So he's like the Detroit guy, kind of outdoors, right? So you did yours like at Belle Isle, and it showed your brand. You could have picked anywhere. You could have picked the zoo. You could have picked anywhere, but you wanted the water. You wanted to show peacefulness. You wanted to show blue because that's your personality. So they bring a microphone, right? This is like one of the props they bring. So obviously they want to speak. Once they see pictures of themselves in action or pictures of themselves looking at what other people will see, it kind of helps them develop their brand and really define their brand. And then they kind of say, oh, now I can see what I can become. Because before it's kind of like it's in them. They don't really, but once they actually see it and it's actually developed, they look at the pictures of what they picked, what they chose, what colors they picked, then they say, oh, okay. And they see a consistency in what they picked in their brand shot. I had one lady that was a STEM lady, so she's into STEM. So I told her, I said, bring some things. So she brought a magazine, Scientific America, some kind of stethoscope or, I don't know, thing that you look at, you know, everything. But it was like science things. I was like, okay. So when people see your picture, they're going to get that. And that's how she saw her brand. The colors she brought was part of her personality. So I would say for anyone, if you're trying to define your brand, book a photo shoot and do like a brand shoot. Not like a headshot, like, oh, you know, this is like high school. But like a whole brand shot. And then the poses that you would do, the colors that you pick, the props that you bring, kind of will help define your brand. And you'll look at it and you'll see it. And it'll help you kind of develop the story around it.
So we're talking about visual cues.
Right.
Visual cues that indicate to your audience what they can expect from you. And that is another component that is so necessary for relationships. We all want some degree of predictability. And so if I can on initial blush get a sense of the brand that I'm engaging with and make some decisions about, do I want to continue forward? Is this aligned with what I'm looking for? What are my expectations back from this? And if those things are met, as I engage with that brand, that demonstrates that that starts to build those elements that build relationships, that trust and predictability. But what I really like about David's brand, and I was so happy that he was able to be here tonight, is I just think there's a real purpose and alignment with who you are internally, and then how you exude that with your brand. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's getting more popular now. I think millennials, when we see business, we see it a little bit differently in this day and age, to where we have this belief that we have a responsibility, even in business, that we are creating products or creating models that are not just for profit, but how are we designing things? How are we designing sustainability to the point where even if we're selling products or we're designing products or we're entrepreneurs, how does that benefit society? How does that benefit communities? How does that benefit people that I'm trying to serve? And so I think in this day and age, you have so many young people and people in general that are interested in solving problems with products, solving problems with business models, where I can make money but do good at the same time. And so for us, we like and love fashion. And we believe that fashion says a lot about who we are as people without necessarily saying it. You know, there's definitely graphic t-shirts that say what you do, but there's a lot about fashion that those visual cues that you're talking about. And so our why drives our business. Our why is not to make a ton of money. We want to make a ton of money. We want to be profitable. We want to be a sustainable company. But at the same time, that's not what gets us up every single day. We've been working on this business for like 10 years now. We still aren't profitable. 10 years of unprofitability on the for-profit side. We do well on the non-profit side. But the for-profit side, we still aren't where we want to be.
Yeah.
But that hasn't changed who we are, because we started with a set of values. So our set of values, when you talk about consistency, your actions are just a reflection of character. It's a reflection of who you are. So for me to be consistent, I want to align whatever I'm going to say my brand is based on who I am, because that's what I'm going to bring you every single day. That's my character. And so for a consumer, I want to align myself, or I want to solve problems with people that believe the same thing that I believe. I have to connect with people. So I'm designing services, I'm designing products for a particular person that has a particular set of values. It's not necessarily that they like red, but there's a reason why they like red. There's an experience that they have with the color red. So I have to identify what makes people tick, and then I'm going to solve based on that tick. And I believe that's what a brand does. It solves problems and builds relationships. But for me to build relationships, I got to know who people are. And so for us, it's about connecting with people that have that are into style, but at the same time, understand our social component, understand what we're trying to do with young people, understand opportunity and education and why that's so important. So for us, it's much bigger than, oh, I like that shirt, but we're really trying to get to the reason of why you are who you are, not just your likes.
Yeah, I think there's so much truth to what you're saying there, and I think that, what you're hearing from the panel up here is a sense of purpose and a passion for that purpose and a dedication to it. And I think a number of people have hit on that about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that you really have to believe those things. And you talk about, David talked about two things that come to mind there. One, that the relationship that a brand has is not one-sided. If I think about my best friend, hopefully they can reciprocate that comment, right? And so that relationship goes both ways. And so there does need to be some reciprocity around the values and around the experience and about those things that the reason why you have affinity for an individual or for a brand. And so that ability to communicate, I'm not just providing you something that you want, but there's something good about this that you can align with, that aligns with your own beliefs. And the other thing that you mentioned is authenticity. You've got to be authentic, and I think we've heard that from everybody so far. I'm going to tap into Matt here about so mindfulness. Talk about authenticity and how do you take your clients and have them hone in on being authentic and mindful of truly who they are, the authenticity of who they are.
Yeah. I might answer that. So what comes up for me here, there's a quote from Seth Godin, who's a marketing writer. He often says, people like us do things like this, right? And David touched on it really wonderfully. It's about aligning with purpose and what people believe. What we haven't yet told you, if you are entrepreneurs, is being authentic, getting on stage and telling people what you believe, and going on a limb, it's really scary, right? And so I can sit and tell you, go be yourself, people will join you, and then you can try that and go, that feels really, really scary, I don't want to do it. So that's going to happen, right? And we'd be foolish to tell you, like, no, this is really easy, you just go and go create a brand that's fun. It's fun because it's scary, because it makes an impact. So the question, so what I do with my clients, what I do to help people find who they are, is to help them remember who they are when they're at their best. And Steve actually made a really good point here. It's like, why are you, there's an exercise that Simon Sinek developed as part of the Find Your Why process that instructs people to go ask their friends, why are you friends with me? And if you do that with 5 or 10 people, you'll find that there's a common theme. It's the way you make them feel. That's your brand. And your job is to go and be that more often. So when I think about brands, what I've started to tell folks is you want to create zeros and you want to create tens, which means you want to have people who are tens who absolutely love you and will follow you to the moon, and you want to have people who say, people like me don't do things like that. And that's scary. You'll feel like you'll be kicked out of wherever you are. Like you feel like you're all alone sometimes. But that's the only way to get tens. I promise you this. So what I would invite all of you to do is to notice the times that you're really scared, that you feel like you're completely on edge, and lean into it. Because that's who you are, and that's the person that's going to make a really big impact in the world. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, it was good. I'm inspired. I'm inspired. So, within the group here, you know, you might be thinking about this from your own personal brand perspective, or you might be here representing part of a company, a large company, or maybe your own, or something in between. But another thing to be mindful about, and people here are touching on it, is the things that define a brand or maintain brand relationship in 2019 and the 21st century are very different than they were as short as 25 years ago. And the advent of social media and the ability for people to step up and identify themselves with certain brands and then broadcast that and be advocates or evangelists for brands and for others to see that and decide that's what that brand is, and I'm going to follow that as well. That's so much out of the control of the originator of that brand. And so I think it's really valuable for all of us to talk a little bit about the reality is that in the 21st century, a brand cannot define itself and say this is who we are and go out and force that position out into the community, because all of you and anybody else that engages with that brand has an ability to go, I disagree, or I do agree, or I actually feel something different. And that voice has purchase. And so because of where we're at with the ability for all of us to engage with those things, it is important that your brand has authenticity, because someone can call you out. Say, no, that isn't who you are. Whatever that brand may be. We stand for this, and we go forward. Well, there can be large swaths of community that can say, no, it's not. And that's out of the brand's hands. And so a brand's ability to manipulate, and that's maybe not the right word, but a brand's ability to determine what it is and what it means and its purpose, it better be authentic. It has to be authentic in the 21st century. Because if it's not, people will call you out, and you will not build those relationships. And so this idea that you've got to have a real understanding of your audience, and then you also probably have to have a degree of, perhaps it's flexibility. I'm not sure if that's the right word here, but as you receive back, this is who we are, and if you're getting that back or you're not getting that back, that gives you indicators of either your message needs to be more clear, or in fact your message is hitting in a different way than you thought. And so those are things to be mindful of as well. So I wonder if people here want to share about the back and forth of the brand relationship.
You talk about social media. So it has changed, like in terms of like brands and social media. So how many people saw that film on Netflix or Hulu called Fire Island?
Yeah.
It was about Fire Festival. Fire Festival. And so really it was a fake festival, so to speak, but it was built on a brand that was basically done for social media. It was a brand from Instagram, and had thousands of people going to the Bahamas it only existed in their mind online through movies, pictures, influencers like one of the Kardashian girls, saying that you should go here is hot. And it was all fake. I mean, like the worst nightmare of anybody. And so I have watched that movie a couple of times, once on Hulu and once on Netflix, and I was just amazed from the standpoint of not to say the millennials were gullible, but the fact that it's like, how could you pay money for something that doesn't exist? But they think it's so true. That's the point of like a brand. And then they talk about how the colors that they use, the bright orange, and how if someone says, oh, this is good, you should go, how that influencer just would make people do it. But they didn't even have a plane ticket, they didn't have any detail. So I've watched, when you want to talk about brand go bad, like Breaking Bad, that was Breaking Bad. That's what that was. It was like amazing. But the social media has made people so authentic, because that's really like the opposite of that. And just really just showing beautiful women, beautiful pictures. And the millennials, my daughter's like that, she said, it's so much that brands have to, personal brands have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with before. So we don't have to, if you didn't have any confidence about yourself, you should not really scroll social media, because it would really it would deter you from thinking everybody's doing everything well except for me. So anyway, so if you haven't seen Fire Festival, it really talks about how brands can manipulate people without people really even understand like why they're being manipulated. And it's a fascinating story.
It's really unfortunate, and I can see where, with the virtual space that we all engage with our smart devices, that there is an ability to create a sense of something that might not exist. Now that could be for good or that could be for bad. Clearly here there was some nefarious intent underneath it. But we had also talked about, I think Carrie, you had mentioned, and I think I've heard it from all of you, is, you do have to have the courage to say no. To say that as a brand, we stand for these things. And inherently, as a result of making those stands, there are things you do not stand for, and you won't stand for. And as a brand that's looking to perhaps grow from something small to something big, and it's like, hey, that's great, I like that you can do this. Can you do this, this, and this for me? And there's a difference between these are things I can do versus this is what I should do, or this is what I'm meant to do. And so being, feeling empowered to say no to a line of products that might be profitable but don't align with your ethos. Or, and Carrie, you talked about that too as you speak to as you in your classwork. But I'm sure with your experience with the businesses that you've launched and then sold, that you've had opportunities to allow that brand to go somewhere where it wasn't, and you had to say no.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Many times. One of my businesses was in healthcare staffing, so we provided physicians and other healthcare professionals to go out and fill needs where there was a desperate need in the community. And one of the physicians that I worked with, who I considered a wonderful mentor of mine, said early on, we are not in the business of warm bodies. We are in the business of providing good care. And you will not hire somebody unless that is somebody that you will send out and have treat your family. And I took that to heart, and that became part of our brand. Our competitor represents somebody that I decided to reject because this is not somebody that I have found to be the type of person I would have treat my family. Is it difficult at the time? Yes, because they're feeling the client's need. And I'm saying to the client, even though I've already had the opportunity to present this candidate, I'm saying I can't meet your need right now. I understand what your needs are. I will meet your need when I have the right candidate. So it's very hard to walk away from those opportunities. When you're building your business, you just want to do business, right? You want to start producing revenue and you want to say, look at me, I'm producing revenue. But it certainly is not that. I wanted to be known, I wanted our brand to be known as somebody that you could rely on for good, really good healthcare providers. And it really did change the way that people view temporary staffing in the healthcare community. And I'm very fortunate that I got that advice early on.
I think that these seem to both be pretty related in my mind. And coming back to what are the things that we can actually control, that I can actually control as a brand, right? I can decide where I come from every day and the decisions that I make as a company. I can decide the partnerships I'm going to say yes to. I can decide how I treat people. I can decide who I hire, and I can decide how I treat them. I can decide the products that I put out. What I can't control is anything that happens after that. Right? And today, it seems as if we're confronted with it much more now that social media exists, as Steve pointed out, than, you know, in the heyday of advertising in the 50s and 60s, Mad Men days, but there was a radio and a television, right? And then no one was talking 24/7 about a brand. It felt like there was much more control, but the reality is, I'll get metaphysical here, we really can't control anything aside from what's going on here. So that's really important to consider, right? And what we get to do as business owners, as folks with personal brands or developing a brand, is we get to decide every single day when we wake up, how am I going to approach this day? Where am I going to come from? And that's really, I think, the most important thing. I think of brand, I think of who am I being and how am I being. And then all of my actions sort of trickle down from that.
Looked like you were ready to jump in on that.
I was just going back a little bit. I do think there's a fine line to, you know, wanting to stay consistent and saying no. For us, we've also had to pivot. You know, we've also had to do things we didn't think was going to be like the final product. We rebranded. At one point, we rebranded. You know, we
And you probably will again.
hopefully not. Maybe we should. But no, so we had to do more listening. We weren't listening enough. We were stuck in what we thought was branding, like what we thought our brand was. And when we first got going as a company, I thought our idea was like so good, like that I was asking, you know, entrepreneurs and people who were in the position that I wanted to get to, hey, would you sign this non-disclosure agreement, you know, before I discuss my idea with you? And they're like, dude, you don't get out of my office. Like, do you want me to give you some advice? And so I thought the idea was so good. Like, it was $1 million idea that I wasn't sharing it with people. And so because I wasn't sharing it with people, the idea wasn't as good as I thought it was. Right? Because I'm doing the thinking.
Right, yeah.
So through that process, our brand, like, I didn't know enough even about branding. And so a lot of things didn't work from our visuals, and we struggled with consistency, we struggled with a lot of things, but I think in large part it was because I wasn't listening, I wasn't sharing the idea enough, I wasn't going and saying, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? I wasn't talking to people because I didn't want people to steal it. So it didn't end up as good.
Yeah.
And now these days, like, we're so into feedback. We're so into what do you think? Like, Cuckoo's right here. She's in the second row. She runs our nonprofit. She does everything else too. But, like, I don't even write an email unless I send it to Cuckoo. Like, what do you think of, how does this email come off?
Yeah.
Like, I'm writing it, but how does it feel to you? Like,
Right.
So we're constantly asking people, like, what do you think? How can we make this better? How can we improve? Like, you know, so that we are sure that we've got enough feedback in order for us to make a decision that's rooted in more, I would say, research than just my own personal viewpoint. So we've had to pivot, but listening, I think, is also very important.
Yeah. So we're talking about that 360 component of every one of us, and of brands, that it isn't just about listening. It isn't just about, hey, if I could just get my message out there, we're gonna hit big. It is about getting feedback from your audience, and from those you intend to reach, and then whether or not you're echoing back what you stand for, and if you're not. And you know, there's a wonderful saying that a friend of mine shared with me, and I use this often, and it says that it's difficult to see the picture when you're inside the frame. And that's what you're talking about here, is that when you are just ensconced in your own mind or your own self, that ability to get true, honest feedback.
It's your baby.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yes.
it's yours.
Yeah.
Like, and you know how parents are. We think
Yeah.
our babies are like
It's
amazing.
the
Like,
genius.
they can't
It's
do.
the smartest,
I
cutest
don't have
kid.
any babies, but that's what they tell
Mine
me.
is the smartest, cutest.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when it's ours, like we're less likely to criticize. We're less likely
Right.
to
Right.
give feedback that may not be
Right. Well, there's a bias. There's an inherent bias that we can't avoid. And so, but having that courage to open it up for criticism, put something out there. You know, David's designing fashion and putting it out there, and if the comments against it are directly personal in many ways, right? And the ability to take that criticism for what it is versus finding hostility or defensiveness within who you are. And part of it's being centered about who you are and what you stand for. And whether that's an individual or whether that's a brand, those things are so critical to staying focused on that end goal. Whether it's, if you look at a company like Nike, it started as a running shoe company. And now, Nike can put a swoosh on a swim cap and suddenly be featured in the Olympics. That demonstrates incredible power and persuasion with that mark. But the mark didn't get them there. It was the consistency of the promise of that product and and the aspiration that it delivered, that it put out there, and the feedback that the individuals actually using it and finding truth in it that helped elevate that brand to the point that Nike can put a swoosh on a swim cap and immediately unseat a 100-year-old brand, Speedo, at the top levels of competition in that space within a couple of years. But there's got to be authenticity to it. There absolutely has to be authenticity to it. But it's wonderful when we get to that point where a mark does speak to, a mark comes to represent all those aspects that we talk about when we think about a relationship with another person. It's about 7:20, and I wonder, we want to open this up to all of you, and really, let's make this a valuable, usable experience for you in the audience. Are there questions that for people up here that we can answer for you?
Hi everyone, my name is Brianna. So one thing I'm really trying to understand is with social media and consistency, how do you create that? Because there's always something new, and I'm fearful for when Instagram is no longer the most popular thing out there. What am I going to do for my business? So that's one thing that I'm concerned about. And kind of just to get it out there, another thing, they're saying that Black households will not have, it's something with the household income for with Black families by 2053, I think. I kind of wanted to know if Ms. Carrie and, I'm sorry, I don't know because you're talking to me, but I want to know if you two could speak on that because I am a small Black-owned business and I don't want to have no income by 2053. So.
Well, one of the things I was telling them was that never put all your eggs in one basket and go to social media because they will go. Tumblr will go. Periscope may go. Facebook may go. Mark Zuckerberg, you may say one day, you know what, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you can put all your business on there. So I always say it's like you're renting on social media. So you want to own your own home. So obviously owning your home is better than social media. So that's your website, your own hosting, and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that you have your own customers via your email list so you can communicate with them that way. Instagram and all the social media, really just breadcrumbs that lead people back
Okay, well, yeah, whatever it is, I'm kind of.
Either way, it's a scary statistic.
Exactly.
Their net income or?
It's like their like you said, wealth, like their assets or something of that nature, yeah.
The network.
Okay.
The network,
Yeah.
okay.
I think for me personally, it's about value, right? It's, when you are bringing value, and it goes back to solving problems, right?
Okay.
If we solve problems for other people, people are willing to pay you a lot of money for solutions.
Okay.
Right? Real problems that are out there, if you are the ones that have the answer, have the solution, the amount of value that you can bring to situations, people will pay you money to do, right? And so I think the focus is on an individual level is what value am I bringing? What value am I bringing to the company that I currently work at? A lot of people see their job as I get a paycheck.
Yeah.
That's not really why they hire you. They hire you to make, the hope is that you make the company more profitable, right? So even my mindset has to change to not what do I receive, but it's got to be what I give, right? It's got to be the value, and if I bring more value, people are willing to pay me more money because I am positively impacting them. So if it's your personal brand, right? What value am I bringing to the people on my email list? What value am I bringing? Like, why are people following my Instagram page? If I'm bringing them value, more people will come, right? So I fundamentally believe we have to solve problems for other people, and it's got to be based on value. If the value goes out, the value is going to come back in, right? So if it's a personal business, if it's a personal brand, if it's a business, I think it has to be rooted in value. And if you focus on that, I think even at your individual job, if you have a job, you bring more value, you get promoted.
Correct.
If you come in and say, I'm going to be the best, I don't care if you're flipping burgers, I'm going to be the best burger flipper at McDonald's, I guarantee you will get promoted by the value that you bring. All right? So I wouldn't be worried about, I'm going to be worried about that because I want to help. But in terms of you personally in your household, I believe the focus is when you understand who you are and the value that you bring, you approach your job differently, you approach your business differently, because you understand that if I'm not at my best, somebody else is not at their best because of the value that I have, right? So when we work with our kids, we have workshops on a weekly basis. For those 2.5 hours that we work with our kids, and this is at the end of the day, this is at the beginning of the day, our focus as a team is, how do we bring the best 2.5 hours to these kids' week? Like when they come through our doors, it's not school, like we are going to add tremendous value to them. And that's why they keep coming back every week, is because they get something out of it. And so I think having that approach and that mindset gets you far.
And I challenge that.
Responsibility. Like if, let's say this strip of black businesses just open, but nobody owns the actual brick and mortar that they're running their business out of, there's a great chance that they could lose everything that they have. So it starts with ownership.
And economic literacy too.
Yeah.
Because it tends to be sometimes African American consumers tend to be more with the conspicuous consumers.
I know.
That they will buy
Anything.
a lot of luxury items and then just being a lot of debt. And so African Americans as a whole have to really not find value in buying things.
Yes.
They learn how to save. And that's a whole other conversation.
Okay.
But as a personal brand, every time you engage with somebody, there's an opportunity to create an advocate. And those that you really leave an impact with, and you deliver on whatever that brand promise you have as a person, you can actually turn them into evangelists for you, right? Those people go out and advocate for you, and in fact will say, hey, this is who you should see. You should really check this out. But there was a question. Yeah, there's other questions.
Yeah, so I kind of have a specific question. I'm a family doc, and I started a business where I'm more in touch with my patients. So I kind of removed the middleman between me and my patients. And I consider myself kind of like a thought leader in the branding space in this specific space that I'm in. But I have a hard time convincing other doctors to open themselves up, especially on social media. So a lot of docs want to have their own little pocket of social media with 200 connections and not engage with the greater community, and thinking that they can build their professional brand, their business brand through like other social media channels, and missing out on the opportunity to build their brand in, from their personal brand out, rather than starting a second entity and building that up. Because I believe that these docs have a lot of clout and a lot of trust. Naturally, that comes with the profession. So I'm struggling with communicating with these doctors on how to embrace that personal brand through social media. And a lot of these doctors are, maybe 40, 50 years old and not quite in tune with these social media. So I guess, could you speak to the value of professionals, lawyers, doctors who are launching their own businesses, embracing those social media channels, or I don't know. I'm trying to get these doctors to understand this value, and I need fresh take on it.
What do you think the barriers are? Is it that they don't believe it affects their business? Do they?
Yes.
Are they? Okay.
And they are uncomfortable with, this is my patient, I don't want to be friends with them on social media.
Is it more regulations, HIPAA laws, things like that?
No, I don't think HIPAA plays into it as much, because a lot of these doctors have their patients waive their HIPAA obligations so they can text and email them. I don't think that's the issue.
They're just trained to really just think in a box that my patients are separate and my business is separate, and I don't have a personality, I don't have a brand. Because
Yeah.
I've done a workshop for dentists before. And so
Okay.
the dentist was like, we're going to promote our business and business. I said, well, really, sometimes because people are so scared, you need to really show that you're a real person. So they never thought of that. They never thought that in order for people to feel more comfortable coming to their business, that they have to know who the dentist is as a person. They never thought of it. So you do have to be the advocate, because they have to know that the patients want to know that the dentist is a real person, that they golf, that they took a vacation, that they have a wife, whatever, that they're a real person.
What did you do what do you tell them to convince them to do that, is the question.
I show them the difference between I will find one, like it could be you as an example, like the difference between what you're doing and how you engage with your patients and how your business is grown, and how those your patients are now evangelists because they are basically telling people about you versus not. And so basically I say, oh, so that's the thing, that I can actually do this on Facebook, I can actually do this on, yes, you can. They just need to see it because they're so into this space. They need to show them what it looks like in social media without really, especially the same thing with bankers or anybody that has a lot of regulations around their field. They just feel like I might break a rule. So you have to show them that the way you're doing it, it's okay. You're not going to break a rule and it'll go because people trust you.
I'm curious as to why you're concerned about convincing them, because you have an opportunity to capitalize on something here.
Well, he's like an advantage.
These are people in your practice? Is that what you're?
Well,
Do they share a practice with you, or?
No, I'm an individual. I have a practice here in Southwest
Okay.
Detroit, and I really enjoy it, like leaning into the branding and social media and marketing. I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues try to set up their own practices. It's called direct primary care. We work directly with their patients, but they fail, and I think one of the big reasons they do it is because their social media game is weak. So I want to help my colleagues.
So you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart.
And I'd also, just in full disclosure, it'd be great to build a product around this, like an online course, how you can build your
Yes.
practice through building your personal brand. Right, so I'm trying to put this together. I'm a speaker at this conference and about personal branding and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it just feels like they just want to be stuck in this old way, and I'm just trying to push them over to some, just looking for something. So I'm sorry,
What's your name?
Paul Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this. I feel your care, both for the doctors and for your patients. So I can tell this is really important. So thank you for coming tonight and for asking this question, first of all. You're right. Right? Like, they're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we think about trends, right? There's sort of this like early adopter phase, and then more and more people adopt, and then at some point it's like too much to ignore, and then we fall over. What we know about really conservative professions, a lot of them are like really late. And so what I see you as is someone who's really pushing to try to change culture. So I talked about Seth Godin. He's someone who talks about this a lot. It's really freaking hard to change culture. We're like punching on a wall. So you're right. You're onto something brand new. It's going to be hard. You're not doing anything wrong either, right? And so like I would encourage you just to like if it's really important to you, keep going. Just keep going and talk one-on-one to them and figure out what's really scary. Right? We know that people change if pain gets strong enough or pleasure seems high enough, the potential for pleasure, right? So right now, the potential pain of changing, it feels too strong compared to the upside. So your option to change their mind is either show them it's going to be really painful to not change, they're going to lose a bunch of money, or whatever it is they care about, or show them they might make a bunch more money, if they care about money.
Or have them pay you to do it.
There you go.
Yeah, keep going, man. I mean, this, like, we need you.
It only takes one person to start a movement.
Yeah.
And that's where you are. I see that. I know. I work with physicians. I understand how set in their ways they can be, right? They've been trained to believe that once they graduate, they hang up a shingle and people will come to them. It doesn't happen that way anymore. Healthcare is very different. The way we touch our patients' lives are very different. And I really appreciate the fact that you're embracing that. And I really am excited to learn more about how you're going about doing that. And I encourage you to stick with it. You might not have it all figured out right now. Like you just want to package it up and send it because you believe in it. And you want to bring it to them. And here it is in this nice little package. But you haven't packaged it yet. You're doing that right now. Be patient. Be patient with the process and show them your actions. Demonstrate what you've done. And that will only come with time and commitment and consistency. And you're in the right place. Oh my God, I'm excited for you. Keep at it, please. I want to see where this goes.
And one final thought on that too. I mean, 'cause I initially had my marketing hat pop, like light went on, and I was like,
Right,
okay,
we all do.
You got a captive audience. Why would you want to? But you have a new market there. But one of the things that you might want to think about is framing the position that you have to your fellow to your peers in a way that's being able to articulate what problem are you trying to solve, and is that the problem? Is there mutual agreement that that's a problem that needs to be solved amongst your peers? And if you can articulate, if there's this larger problem that you're solving through your actions, and you've got and it speaks to the community, it speaks to your peers, and you can articulate that, then I think you can probably make a better case, a compelling case for, if you get agreement, if you get heads nodding, yes, this is a problem, and then you can demonstrate. And what I'm doing is addressing that and providing some solutions towards that problem, and we're seeing progress, and that's certainly the evidence-based, right? You're a scientist, you recognize that, so that evidence-based solutions will help, I think, probably tip people your way. But there was other hands, right?
I have a question. I just wanted to speak more about what you both were saying about the idea that you have from the area of you saying that you had sheltered it. So besides discernment, when you have something like that, are you saying, because you said tell it to the audience, and then I heard you say, well, I've been for so long, so are you recommending that we share the ideas with the people that we want to buy into it, or an expert team, or like a panel, or a marketing somewhere like that? I understand the getting the feedback, but I just want to make sure that I'm doing it to the right area, so I'm not holding on something that is not guarded, but I don't want to put something out so soon and then it just flops, because ultimately when you put something out, what people say, they either build it up or kind of tear it down, so you kind of want to, for the right read to shelter it, but I want to kind of, still get corrective criticism and do it the right way.
From my personal experience, I mean, this is not to say that this is the right way.
Okay.
If my personal feeling now is, if I tell somebody something and they steal it, they still won't get it done like I'll get it done.
But they're not authentic.
Like they don't have my passion, they don't have like, even if they stole it and tried, like,
Okay.
I personally feel that, so that's just my personal feeling.
Okay.
And then secondly to that, I think just sharing it with everyone, just talking about it. Like, it may be at the house, it may be, like, this is what I'm working on, because you'd be surprised who you think is an expert, who you think could add value to your idea.
Okay.
You tell somebody something, and you think about this 24/7, and so you've thought of everything, and then like they'll just say something, and you'd be like, I never thought of it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't have to be that they have credentials. It doesn't have to be that they started businesses. It doesn't have to be. They just may look at it differently than you. And that could be the key to you, like, that's it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I feel personally that you just want to begin to talk about it. You want to begin. Now, you may have something very confidential, and I'm sure if Nike is working on this technology and they know Adidas is also working on the tech, they're probably not going to be out sharing those. But we got to get to, we got a long way to go to get to that point. You know what I mean? So, for me personally, in my experience, and again, this is not the right way. I think you're open, you share it, people that you respect, but you'd be surprised who may give you a different outlook on something that you think a lot about that may change your thinking.
And I also say the opposite of that in a way. I had a client that only talked to people who were her yes people. Okay? So the people that just say whatever she said was yes, yes.
Okay.
And so I said, well, you got to come out of the lab. We got to test this. No, it's going to be great. They love it. My family, my children, they love it. They love you. Okay? They love you. Whatever you're going to do, they're going to love you. So we got to test this. I said, well, if you think this is so great, let's send out an email and let's see who buys. If this is such a great idea, the best thing since sliced bread, let's send out an email to 200 people to see who buys. Send it out. Crickets. Nobody. I said, so now she's want to quit. Want to quit, didn't work. But I said, no, we're out of the lab. We have to just do some adjustments. Okay. Now we fix it. But you can't just think it's going to be a great idea because Snap, Crackle, Pop said it was a great idea. We got to go out of the lab and actually in social media or email us or whatever it is and say, what do you think? So that's part of it. You do ask, and you got to know to ask other people that don't really think.
And one thing we haven't touched on yet is, imagine if you start telling 10, 15, 20, 50 people about it before it exists, they get excited. You suddenly have 50 fans.
Yes.
They tell 10 people each, you have 500 fans.
And you got accountability, because now you got a brand.
Right.
And yeah,
That's a super problem.
like you have people really excited about what you're doing before you even launched anything. So think about it like that. You're slowly building your base to start.
There's even things like, I know that, Matt, who I've known a long time, even something like survey, right? You could even deploy a survey. And I don't know the specifics, because I don't dabble in that space, but I know enough to say that, she could put together a simple survey, right, and put that out there.
Yeah. Google Form is a free survey. You have a Google account, ask people what they like. I don't know, like you're building you want to figure out your next style. Like, what's the stuff that you like to wear, or what you think is missing, or what would you buy from us? How much do you pay? Where do you get your information, right? You can start to figure out like what's going on inside people's heads.
I'm not, because you said something very important, because I know branding is very important, and usually when you get into branding, people are paying people to professionally brand them. For starters,
That's important though. So have you been, so you've been working at another salon and then you're gonna
Yes,
be?
I have. So the area that I want to bridge the gap on is when I start for people, I get two types of people. They really have a good stylist, and the area is really urban and they really don't like it, or they don't feel comfortable. Or they have a mediocre stylist they really don't like, but they love the salon. So I want to bridge the area where you love your stylist and you are safe and you love the place you get at.
Okay.
So that's kind of where my niche is, because everybody I talk to is one or the other. There's never one where you just happy all the way around.
Gotcha. And so this is your first,
Brick and mortar.
so you've been working at another shop,
Yeah.
now you're opening up so now you're gonna become the owner and it's not gonna be you, you're gonna hire other
Yes.
people to also do hair at this salon.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I do have we can talk offline. I got a lot of websites and stuff cheap.
Okay.
So I launched my company in 2015. I was a marketer before.
Okay.
I still don't have a logo. I
Okay.
built my website myself. I'm bringing someone on board and she recently was making like a proposal and was like, hey, can you send me the brand guidelines and logo? And I laughed. I was like, well, there are none. I mean, I made it up. So,
Okay.
so this is what I tell people is like, if you want to start a business, you need a client or a customer. You need to do it well, and then you need another client or customer, and then you figure out if you have a business. So like, the website, all that stuff comes next.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Get
But
that
yours is
started.
a little bit different though, because you already have customers.
Yes.
Right, and so now we have some background that we can at least work off of.
Okay.
So we can include both of those
Okay.
ideas into one.
Well, I would say for her, because it's so visual what she does. And so a lot of students, maybe at CCS, Center for Creative Studies, they are very, very creative. They're looking for, and you would be like fun for them. You know what I'm saying? Like versus class stuff, it's probably not so fun. You would be fun for them. So maybe go to CCS, put something up there, talk with maybe, see if you can get CCS students to do some photos, videos. I mean, the kids at CCS, first of all, in order to go there, they got to be a certain level. So they can do something for you for fun as even a project, maybe a class.
Okay.
Now, my daughter went to Michigan State, and she had this, sorry. She had this class where the companies were part, like a test study, or basically the company, the students worked on their project for the year. And so she was in the higher level marketing. So I'm sure they probably had that CCS, Center for Creative Studies, where they would work on your project, your branding, and obviously under a teacher that would supervise that.
Okay. So that might be a great resource.
I'm kind of in the same situation as well. I also want city match, and I'm moving to Tech Town. So I'm phasing out of the nail industry as a nail tech, and I've been licensed for 20 years. Now I'm going into the same industry, but a nail supply store.
Okay.
Because there's not one black owned in the city. There are all other races and things like that. So how do you kind of separate the two without, because right now I'm stuck between phasing out and beginning, but I don't want to be in the midst of still doing one and not focusing on the other.
Do you have a potential timeline at the current moment?
Well, I got a lot of information last night in class, so hopefully this spring I want to open the store,
Okay.
but I still want to phase away from the nail stylist portion. So I just don't want to be working on too many projects at one time and then something fails.
So I imagine that there's still some more funding that you need to get to
Right.
open up. I think one, just off the top of my head, is like documenting just your process, right? So owning a business is hard, starting a business is hard, opening up a brick and mortar is harder, right? It's the hardest. So a lot of people are in our positions, right? And want to know how you do it. And a lot of times it's not even like I'm an expert in the area, it's just I'm gonna show you what I'm going through, right? So I think even getting people in tune to who you are and the stuff that you're going through is enough to even get started and get people already interested in this potential, whatever it's gonna be. So it could be like, this is my day in the life, this is what I do. I have to go and work, and do nails. And then afterwards, I gotta go and work on my business and just start documenting that. Start an email newsletter to where every week I'm gonna blog about all the stuff that I did this week, preparing for, and I'm gonna show you, the top 5 nail styles that I did this week, right? And people can just start to follow, right? And then I think you may get more traction than you thought, and maybe funding, if I have 10,000 Instagram followers, maybe somebody's more likely to give me 25 grand or 50 grand because I've already shown that people are interested in what I'm doing. So that can maybe help in funding too.
I think along with that, though, it's a process, right? When you're leaving this thing that where it's earning an income for you, it's scary to leave that behind. So be very patient with that and know that for a long time when I started my first company, I had an office in my home, and I worked 24/7. Hospitals worked 24/7. I was available 24/7, but I also had to have other professional business going on that funded that. So it is a balance. I appreciate that it is a balance, and you don't want to lose focus, and you're more wanting to reach for this because that's what you're passionate about. But know it's a process and be patient with the process, and just embrace that work because it's going to be a lot of hard work. But you'll look back on it someday and you'll go, oh my God, wasn't that the greatest time? At the time you won't think it, but someday you'll look back and you'll say that was the greatest time of my life. Trust me.
One more thing. Does the current nail salon that you're at have any supplies in it?
No, actually, I left because the industry is not what I'm used to. So it feels like work, even though it's a passion, and I don't want it to feel like work.
Who buys nail supplies? Is it the people that do the nails or the people that get the nails? Do they also buy nail supplies?
Well, it depends on the nail stylist, because some nail stylists will incorporate that in their business and allow their customers to buy. But most often than not, it's the nail techs and the students, the instructors and the students that buy from the nail salon. But you do have some people that want to say, well, I want to have something at home just in case something happens. And, it's pretty much the ambiance. You just want to go in and see what's
I can almost hear the entrepreneurial gears churning in David's head. He's sitting here asking us questions. There was someone over here too, right? I want to make sure we get. Oh yeah.
A couple questions ago we talked about surveys. So nowadays a lot of things when you're working with investors or managers, it's not important if you're getting measured. And as someone who gets measured, I found that to be helpful and frustrating. So I don't know if you guys have any insight into when building your brand, measurement or metrics have been extremely helpful or a big hindrance to your brand.
Well, in higher ed at the University of Michigan, everything is measured. Everything is, and in fact, nothing's done without data to demonstrate that this is the right thing to do. So data drives the university, and so I get that, and measurement provides validation to those that are not experts about a subject that they are not experts at. And so if you're looking to demonstrate your value to someone that doesn't understand what you do, certainly, being able to show, quantitative data that is, objective and empirical in many ways, that helps elevate someone that doesn't have familiarity with it, their understanding of it. But certainly data is in the 21st century is so incredibly valuable to help you to gain insights as to user behavior, people's inclinations, what actually motivates them versus what part of your brand that maybe you're really proud of, in fact, is a deterrent that they work around. But so you're asking for you. You said, how do you demonstrate your value to those that want to measure you?
Yeah, and have you found that measurement would be helpful as you're creating a brand, or it's a hindrance because you know I have to do this to create my brand, but I can't measure it right now. Other people might find that.
So that leap of faith, right? Right. Well, the entrepreneurs here can probably speak to that better than I can.
Well, I think you can probably speak to it.
No, I want to.
Yeah, I know. I'm a David has had to do. But I use that information all the time. There's nothing more powerful than a very genuine testimonial. And when it comes from a patient in the industry, the healthcare industry, it's huge. And so I use that as an opportunity for, not for it to only validate our company's brand, but for also to get people out there and start talking about our story and how they're part of it.
And, you know, I do have some thought there then too. So, you know, one thing you might be able to do is find, if you're in a new space, that there isn't a lot of competition, you know, find something that's similar, that has been around a while, that you can point to as an example of that can be measured. And if you can identify that the attributes of that align with the attributes that you're offering in the audience and so on, and there's a market for it, and point to something that's similar, that might help if you're looking for, you know, venture funding or, you know, capital in that space. I mean, that might help you gain that. But, you know, that's hard, right? That's really hard to do. You get a little bit of a chicken and egg component there.
So I was just wondering, what comes first? Like, does your business and marketing plan come and then your branding, or are you thinking about your branding and then you're creating these things to, you know, run your business?
So I'll say I have a very strong opinion about it. So if we think about the University of Michigan, and when I say U of M in this region, right, you've seen it as you walk through here, you're going to picture a big, thick block maze M.
Yep.
Now, if I were to say, I want you to conjure up what is a 200-year-old education institution that is consistently ranked in the top of all public university rankings, that is about providing doing things for the public good, and really transforming people's lives and elevating and so on. Does a big block M come to mind? Probably doesn't, right? Right. And if you think about if you look objectively at a mark, and if you could remove what it means to you, the Nike logo is awful.
Yeah.
It's just this very simple geometric shape. The Coca-Cola signature, right, is script that is dated. These things, the logo never creates a brand.
Okay.
A logo merely represents what the brand stands for. And if you can be consistent with your brand and your engagement, what you offer, and that value, and that exchange of value, if there's a consistency there, that whatever mark you choose will eventually come to embody all those things that you stand for. And that's how logos, in my line of work, many people, hey, I've got this new company, I've got a new idea, and the first thing I need is a logo, an amazing logo that's going to elevate me up to here. And it just doesn't work that way. The logo embodies what the brand stands for. So first and foremost, be clear about what you stand for, and be authentic in your relationships, and deliver your promise, your brand promise. And through building that, whatever mark you choose will eventually embody those attributes.
Are you saying that logos don't matter, or they should matter at a certain time?
I think at some point, certainly there's aesthetics.
Or do you think there's some industry where logos are more important than others?
Probably in those spaces where it's a brand that's attempting to elevate itself and chase after the leader in that market, creating an identity that has visual attributes of the leader in that market. You think about the Lexus logo and how much that looks like the Mercedes-Benz logo, and there's some similarities there. So it's always, I think there's always it's wise to know your audience, and to know who in your audience is the leader, and then to target, and then to at least to have your identity have attributes that are in that space, because there's an expectation from your audience to some degree that those components will be there, and that reaffirms that you are legit, that that this exchange is worth it. I'm willing to take that risk. But you know, I don't want the pressure, and I tell folks, like, when, you know, like, look, a logo can't get you there. It has to be, there's no logo that's going to elevate you. I mean, there's marks that are beautiful and elegant, and but the promise has to be there. But yeah, I would say that probably in some spaces it's more important than others. I don't know what those categories might be, but you know, certainly fashion would be, you know, that's the visual aesthetic has to be there to reaffirm what you stand for. You know, nails, hair, those things, those are clearly visual aesthetics, and so the mark does need to imbue some of that aesthetic that you stand for.
And when people are trying to get publicity, like if they want to pitch themselves to radio, TV, or print, they have to have a brand, because the producer or the editor, they're looking at the person that's pitching them, and then they may go to their website or Google them, which then kind of like gives your brand, right? So they Google them, and if nothing shows up, then they really will pass on it, because they're looking for someone that has a strong brand. They want to know what am I, like what you said, like what can I expect from this person?
Well, what I was asking was, should you do your business plan and marketing plan, or what I was asking is how does branding work and all of that, but I'm not sure how you got a logo, but I'm just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's the designer. Soft spot.
You know, I want to speak to that, because in having started a business myself, I kind of did it a different way. I didn't have this elaborate business plan. I didn't have anything written out, and I hear in business school nowadays, and I talk to my students who are at the College of Business, you know, I've got to come up with my business plan. I think that's wonderful. You need to lay the groundwork, right?
Okay.
But I spent my time getting out there, like David said, finding out what the pain points were of my potential customers, finding out where I bring value, where I can bring value as an organization, and I built my business on that.
Okay.
Everything started to follow. Once I discovered how and where I brought value, then my brand started to develop. And then when I shared that, like we talked about here, with other people, then I got that feedback, it even developed even more. So and this is my personal opinion, right? Take it for what it's worth, but I'm not really big on having these elaborate business plans.
Yeah.
You know, hit the ground running, solicit that feedback, get to work,
Yeah.
and find your value, and it'll all come together, like Steve said. I really believe that for you.
But not to disagree with you, but
Please do.
not to disagree, I'm just gonna, that is a business plan. Without that, like, that is her business plan.
Just
Like,
get out there.
getting out there, finding the market,
Yeah.
being able to talk to people. Now, she didn't write it down, so she wasn't in her home, like, just on the computer, but part of that process was getting out of the home, getting to talk to people, learning who they are, learning the values, and then where she could add value in that. Like, so she didn't just get on the website, oh, this is going to be my entire business, and I put the website up, but she actually did the business plan in the world. You definitely are going to need to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And just for clarity for everyone in the room, the information I was talking about can be found on theguardian.com, and it is related to the meeting as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thanks for following up on that.
I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan, and I'm not looking to build my personal brand per se. But I'm here in part because my research is
and has consistency in the delivery of the relationship and an exchange of value. But it also has a component of aspiration. And so my best friend is my best friend in part because I aspire to elevate myself to that person's character. And so, the idea that a brand is demonstrating aspirational sort of vision is not a bad thing per se, but if you're talking about that it feels inauthentic, that's a tough one, because if it's inauthentic, it's going to fail. Right? It'll be a flash in the pan. It's like the Fire Fest that Pam was talking about. It'll have its moment perhaps, but if it can't deliver on the promise, it's going to fail. So a neighborhood that's changing and that maybe isn't being authentic to what it has been in a way that is doing a disservice to its legacy, that's a problem, I think, for me, if I think about what I want to cozy up to, and if I'm going to plunk down the largest expense I have, the largest purchase any of us historically make is buying a home, choosing a neighborhood. I definitely want to see, hopefully I'm making that decision carefully. So, I'm not sure. That's a tough question. Are there other thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm working very hard here to discern sort of like the value judgment of whether I feel it's right or wrong for a neighborhood to change and sort of purposefully maybe neglect the people in it, within it, right? Versus sort of like tactically or strategically what works when you're trying to create a brand, right? And I'm trying to like work very hard to parse that out, and I don't really want to get caught in kind of the morality of that. I can talk about like broadly rebranding. I have a very good friend who owns a watch company, and they sold like $150 watches and decided to move completely like more upmarket, $400 or $500 watches, completely knowing that they were gonna just basically leave about 80% of their current clientele, and they had to create an aspirational brand in order to do that. And in order to create that change, they did have to change the aesthetics, as to Steve's point, the expectations that people have at a higher price point, which means that their website had to change, their logo had to change, their messaging had to change. And so that's what I sort of experiencing here on the neighborhood side. Once again, whether it's right or wrong, I don't want to debate. And I wouldn't say it was inauthentic for my friend's brand to rebrand in this way for his company, because that was where they wanted to be, and so they started to live within themselves the quality that deserved the $400 or $500 watch, right? It became made in a different factory, they had higher standards, they changed the equipment, and it sounds to me like that might be what neighborhoods are trying to do in inviting different sorts of businesses to them, versus having sort of mom and pop shops that might like be what we expect at a different sort of brand. Is that at all helpful?
Yeah, I'm in and kind of disagreeing that the neighborhood ever is the one who does the inviting. Usually it's the developer who goes in and says, this is what's going to happen. So I think it's better.
Yes, right, and like we could really get stuck in the terminology, like, and we could have another 2-hour panel on that.
I mean, from a marketing standpoint, it's always easier and smarter to reveal an existing brand truth to your audience than it is to create a new one. Because there's legacy there. There's people that will nod their head and say, yeah, that's it. But yeah, that's tough. That's tough because I'm not sure. I don't know that it's a bad thing, let's say, for someone to come in and try and create a better environment in a place, if that's indeed, if they're aspiring to be something that they haven't been. But if it's not authentic, and if it doesn't pay homage to the legacy and the heritage, that seems to be pretty shallow, and I don't know that there's much longevity in that, but that's a tough question.
I just wanted to speak to that because I kind of grew up in this area and saw a transition. I also worked at the medical center. And I used to walk through past corridor to go to work, and it was horrible and scary. And I used to run just to get to work and run to get home. But the transition allowed for people who work to be able to live here, but also to be able to continue to make this area prosperous. So as someone who still works here, I feel it's valuable to have investors coming in and make a change, but those investments also have to come from within the community. So DLC and Board did offer a lot for employees to come live here, to stay, and that's the kind of effort that you have to put into something in order to make it thrive as a neighborhood. And they also have mixed income properties that are available. I just see that as authentic versus the unauthentic. I'm not sure where the unauthentic part is, maybe more towards downtown, but my own personal experience is this is way better than when I grew up. So you have to take the good and the bad. You know, look at just the bad stuff like they made a risk. It was a huge risk to invest in this area in a time when nobody cared. So people who are spending their money, they're taking a chance. So in some terms, they have to, be able to get something back from that.
Yeah?
I wanted to just make a point about, maybe I guess this would come under personal branding. When I retired, I moved into a condominium in this neighborhood, and I was like one of the early adopters, I guess, and had some reservations at that time. But one of the things that I noticed, and I think you could refer to this as inauthentic, is that people that were coming to buy condominiums were conveying the impression that they were better. And so there was like a snootiness in the condominium building. And it angered me because I had lived in this neighborhood because I'm visually impaired and I need to be able to go to work without a car. So I've lived here through the day. I started here and it was really bad. And of course now things are much better. But it really struck an angry chord in me, and I made a decision that I was going to change the attitude of this building. And so it took about 5 years, and I started a volunteer project to encourage people to donate at Christmas time to people who were less fortunate, because those that are more fortunate, they're blessed. And oftentimes they're blessed through no fault of their own. And so when it took about 5 years, and each year the response of the residents of the building was far improved. And now, it's now into the 7th year, and I've become kind of like a point person for social change in the neighborhood where you can integrate the haves and the have-nots. And so that may not be part of the developer's consciousness, but I do think that the people of the neighborhood need to define what kind of a neighborhood they want to live in. And so, to me, I guess this would be was my little way of personally branding our apartment building. And it has an excellent reputation in the poor neighborhood because of what we have done. We've raised thousands of dollars to help people with schooling, and this past winter was blankets and nobody knew it was going to be so cold. So that definitely helped. But I think that the involvement of the community is extremely important in whatever
so much to the Detroit Center for putting on the event and the great food and thank you all for participating.